Where is the update? Where is it? Give us the update. We want it. We want the update now.
Inevitable.
Coming at you with the speed of a red-line jackal, it's Tyrants on the Field. Welcome back as always. I'm Joe. Brand new year and brand new update. The 2024 update for Warmachines and Hordes has released, as well as the new Steamroller SR2024, and it released, and then we had a slight tweak to it afterwards to help clarify some additional language this week. So it has been about a week since the update, and I have sort of gathered my thoughts on it. I know a lot of other cast had jumped on all of this a bit earlier, so I don't want to rehash a bunch of their points. I want to make a bunch of my own and sort of take the game's temperature as we wander into tournament season, as LVO is kicking off here shortly. And good luck to all those who are attending, and then Captain Con will follow shortly after, and that is going to be an absolute monster of an event. I think it sold out 4 times on the Warmachine side and ended up growing to a 48-person event for the main event. So super exciting there. Warmachine is in a great spot post-update as we continue to rebuild the community from COVID, rebuild from the initial shocks of Mrk4 coming into the water. So hopefully that is a rising tide in your area as well. I know in southeastern Michigan, where I'm located, we are going strong. We're working to try and build up the Ohio meta as well, so that we can really have a strong Great Lakes regional presence across the board and get some store wars going again. So a lot of fun things in what's happened and what's been happening. It is a amazing time for the game once we have sort of a reboot in it. And so the updates are interesting. This was definitely not the Fapocalypse. If anybody was hoping for it to be the Fapocalypse, I don't think you were in the right headspace. Those type of updates from a general design standpoint are not where you want to be. Generally, that means, 1, you haven't been curating the game properly for a long time. 2, it means that your levers by which you can control things have not been exercised routinely enough. And this update was also not small by any stretch of the imagination. I can definitely appreciate and agree to points with arguments that there was not enough done on certain factions, or that having an arbitrary cap is arbitrary and probably shouldn't have been in place. I can hear those, and I will counterpoint with this from a designer's perspective. And again, I don't design for Privateer Press, but I have designed for other games in the past and been involved in other processes. What I can tell you is, anytime you change a variable in an ecosystem, and a miniature game in many respects is an ecosystem, there are long ripples to those changes that seem very benign, at least on the surface. So something as simple as a points cost adjustment has ripples within its own faction, its own selection process. So on a first level thought with it, yes. Let's talk about barragers. Barragers went down a point. They went from 10 points to 9 points. So cool. They went down a point. They're a little cheaper. They felt a little expensive. But why did they feel a little expensive? Well, they felt a little expensive because for 10 points, you get a full unit and banner of Strike Reavers, which are the gunned Reavers with the shields. Now I can have either of those options for the same 9-point slot. And then it becomes a question of which is more valuable. And that value is determined by other choices that I make within a list, but also the Steamroller document that has come out. Because the Steamroller document definitely feels like you want units that can stay in a place or move slightly with an objective and still be able to project power downfield, even better if they can actually do some work downfield. So ranged units have a little bit more premium to them. And so then it becomes which of these two units is going to be generally more survivable, which is going to generally do more work into its competition. Which of the rule setups do I want? And it becomes a real choice. And then this tweak, in the context of Steamroller changing radically, really create an environment in which that singular points cost does have an effect on everything. So now it also affects the value of Strike Reavers, because Strike Reavers now have competition in the 9-point slot in Orgoth where they did not before. And so how does that affect our general list build and our general list build concept? And it's like that in a lot of other factions. So when you're looking at these changes, yes, we can look at the changes in a vacuum and evaluate the relative strength of pieces within the faction, but we have to get the larger context of what changed in SR2024 and how do those changes affect the game as a whole, affect our list build, and affect really the tiering of power. Because I think right now, so my gut reaction to the update is Dusk is a huge winner. A couple of reasons why. Dusk is a faction with a extremely high skill ceiling and was prior to the update. The update has taken a lot of the things that were problematic in Dusk and were relatively limiting factors and eliminated them. The real big one to me is the additional wounds across the board on the undead units. So the Dreadguard archers, the Cav, and the Slayers all going to 8 wounds is huge. You've got 40% wound increase on these units. A little bit of a points bump in a few places. You have an extra rat on the archers. These changes, again, in the context of Steamroller 2024, are massive. And they upped the Eliodon's base mat to 7. So what does that do? Again, in the context of list building, and I'm also bearing the lead a little bit. Well, it has massive changes on list building. I now want a diversity of these Slayer units, or of these Dreadguard units. Slayers become much more viable at 8 wounds. They can actually deliver. The Eliodon becomes a real choice because it doesn't have the propensity to miss nearly as much. And Mrk4 is very much a world of new factions have Mat 7 heavies. And if they don't have a Mat 7 heavy, everybody loses their mind. So, and I get it. The Eliodon's punch was never quite the way it felt intended. I think there are some things in that faction that got overlooked because of the complexity within it, the skill ceiling within it, the fact that they were late to the table in terms of release, so that enough people didn't get enough reps in with them in a competitive setting. I think you're going to see them everywhere. I also think you're going to see Orgoth everywhere. Orgoth, this update, took a couple nerfs, got a couple buffs, but SR2024 is a packet that is very favorable to Orgoth's primary use case, particularly with Hurusk. The fact that the packet wants you to get in the mix quickly, dominate an area, force you to chew through things. These are all things that Orgoth wants to be doing anyway, and the packet really plays well into the Orgoth style. So as a tyrant, I'm quite happy with SR 2024. The other big thing that has changed, that is a massive update to the game, is previously there was a very simple and quaint logic to list building that basically dictated you need one Warmachine or one cohort model at 50 points, two cohort models at 75 points, three cohort models at 100 points. That restriction was evaluated throughout the year, and the general determination was made by the dev team that not all cohort models are equal. There is not a way to actively make all of the cohort models equal within factions without diluting the game and making it non-diverse and non-interesting. So the best thing that they can do in context of list diversity and playing to strengths and understanding that each unit and each cohort model needs to be able to fill a role in its own way and fill a role within an army in its own way without that much of a burden to the player, is that a single cohort model that is non-lesser is all that is required at any points level to play. So what does that mean? Well, that means at 100 points, you're only required to take one cohort model that's non-lesser. At 75 points, you're only required to take one cohort model that's non-lesser. And at 50, you're only required to take one cohort model that's non-lesser. A massive change, a big bump to folks that wanted to run Colossals, frees things up quite a bit. I think it is a slight punishment to Hordes, mostly because Hordes will not be taking advantage of it, simply because of the nature of how Hordes work. They want multiple War Beasts, generally, in the list so that they can keep their Fury going and focused. For focused lists, I think some people are not going to change their cohort list very much. Others, it's going to be a radical change, and you're going to see people take advantage of it. I know for myself, I'm experimenting heavily in infantry-heavy lists. I know when I've been playing around in Dusk, I'm running very Jack light, very Eliadon light. Just the nature of the beast when we're talking here about this type of change. You're going to make that change. For me, aesthetically, I really enjoyed the 3 cohort model requirement at 100. I thought it meant that cohorts were very meaningful to the game, very meaningful part of the game, and were something that we really should be doing more of. So moving to this restriction, or moving away from that restriction, I understand. I understand it from a health of the game standpoint. I do think it's the right direction, ultimately, even if it's not my personal aesthetic choice. But I would rather have a healthy and diverse metagame versus having the arbitrary restriction. What I want to make sure is that this actually creates a healthy and diverse metagame and doesn't plunge us back into the drolls of infantry machine, because I think that there is a propensity in SR 2024 to want to field a lot of infantry anyway, and this just fuels into that. So it'll be interesting to see as we evolve here and get into the packet. Uh, what all this looks like and means in the larger context of competitive play. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the Orgoth changes a little more in depth. We've talked about a few of them. The old Cooper Rogers went up to speed 6, and then a point reduction of 9. The speed 6 is huge, um, particularly in the context of SR2024. The speed 5, they had stumpy legs. They were behind the army. At speed 6, they keep up with the army. With the fact that SR2024 is probably, and the composition changes are probably going to mean more infantry on the field. These guys' value goes up a bit. So there's something that I'm testing out in a couple lists. Additionally, the Tyrant. The Tyrant saw a couple of changes. The Hunter Head went up to cost 3 from cost 2. They increased the POW of the melee on the Harpoon to 14, which is a huge change. Really makes that weapon more attractive in the grand context of the army. And a big one here is they reduced the POW of the quad bolt thrower from 13 to 12. So the quad bolt thrower is a volume fire gun. It's really where a lot of the power in Orgoth was derived in the previous Steamroller document. The ability to field 2 of these Titans for about 16 points each, and then have the ability to throw combined 2d3 plus 2 shots down the field every turn with volume fire. Meaning on large base models they were POW 15. Now they're going to be POW 14. They'll be on par with the volume fire that you see in Khador. Which is good, don't get me wrong, but the jump from 14 to 15 on the curve in terms of what it means from a damage standpoint is significant. So I think this is driving a lot of the changes in Orgoth list design away from some of these tyrants in terms of the shooty tyrants. I still think you'll see some. The quad bolt thrower is not bad by any means. Don't take that as it being bad, but it is a correction that is going to be something that we account for as we list build. Interesting change here, and really the change is less to the model and more to the fact that there is a new command card that was created, which is the Siege Terrace. So the Siege Terrace got 2 buffs on its stat card, and then got the largest buff it possibly could have in the form of Grave Robbers. So where it changes? It changes is speed 6 and rat 6. So it goes up a speed from 5 to 6, goes up a rat from 5 to 6. 2 big changes here. Those are far more helpful than one would think, particularly in the context of this beast. But the big change is Grave Robbers existing, and what Grave Robbers is a card that's free that allows you to give this Siege Tarrasque a rage token. And so it gets its first rage token. You can move up, you can get Mortal Fear up and on the army, which increases its value significantly. And then it's really able to perform for you as a piece, as it sort of was intended as a centerpiece model, as a focal point of the army. I am very, very high on the changes to the Tarrasque. It's been testing exceedingly well for me thus far. I look forward to playing it more. Sabrith. Sabrith took, well, not just Sabrith, but every model that has Perdition took a change. And that change is Perdition is now advance 5 directly toward the enemy model instead of making a full advance. So this does a couple things. One, it eliminates any stacking of speed buffs or speed debuffs. That's something to keep in mind. It's now just a flat 5. It is also directly towards now, not towards. So some of the silliness that we were able to do previously is gone. Still going to be a good spell for setting certain things up. Not going to be our primary spell by any means with Sabrith anymore. If it was for you, she's still going to trade incredibly efficiently. She still has one of the best feats in the game. Being able to play her spell rack without using focus, that's a huge ability. She's still a very, very good caster because Crippling Grasp is still Crippling Grasp, and you can do a lot with it. Reaver Skirmishers got a little bit of a buff. Very welcome changes. They gain Blessed and Prowl. I have no idea why they have Blessed. I'm glad they have it. Prowl is the big change here, as they are an ambushing unit. Ambush to me is huge in the SR2024 packet. So this is a massive increase to their power because they can jump into terrain and become stealthed, which really ups their general survivability. And their damage output is just fantastic, as long as they can get delivered, and now they have a method of delivery. So very exciting. Another one of our casters changed, Kishtar, the Howling Silence. She got some massive revamps, which are very welcome. She got an increase to her number of attacks. So her Death Whisperer and her Blade Strikes are now rate of fire 2, or times 2. Or sorry, they're times 2. They've removed reload, which is excellent. Just having base 4 attacks to range to melee is absolutely huge for her. Additionally, she has ricochet, so really it can be 6 attacks if you don't kill the initial target on the Death Whisperers. So excellent there. She gets Pathfinder, she gets Prowl. Those two changes are massive for her usefulness and survivability. The other one for her usefulness and survivability is increasing her control to 12. Huge. Absolutely huge. The control 12 is one of the most powerful changes on her card. Now for that, she does give up a little bit of her feat, but the feat gets better with the reduction. So her feat goes from roll 2 additional dice on attack and damage rolls and drop the lowest, to add 1 additional die on attack and damage rolls, drop the lowest, but it also grants reposition 3 to her entire battle group. So her ability to output with the Sign's Importance and then have the battle group repo to safety or repo into a contesting position really ups her viability as a leader. I like all of the changes with her. She's somebody I'm interested in getting on the table and getting some reps in with, more so than I've been previously. So I think Kishtar becomes at least a viable option now, where I didn't feel she was as viable in her previous iteration from a tournament standpoint. But now I think you'll see a team at WTC based on these changes with 2 Orgoth players. With the fact they're getting an Apotheosis caster, and they're also getting the caster in the cadre, and I think Kishtar is going to end up being one of the casters in the pairing, with either one of those or either Sabs or Harusk, depending on how that match plays out. Because there's some arguments of how you stack those if you're running 2 Orgoth. Additionally, big changes to the Jackal. The Jackal was one of the most cost-effective arc nodes in the game at 5 points. They have upped the arc node head from 1 to 2. This is a fair nerf. It hurts a little bit, but the Jackal at 5 was with an arc node was the best value in the game. Now we just have a Jackal at 5 with Bloodlust, which is still one of the best values in the game. So it'd be interesting to see if some of those Arc Node Jackals that folks were running become Bloodthirster Jackals, or they cut a point elsewhere. So be interesting to see how it goes. I think Orgoth is a very strong contender for best combination of nerfs and buffs. And really sort of a model of what you would want to see for a faction generally. felt they came out pretty good. Let's talk Winterkorp. Winterkorp is an interesting faction in that it felt close. It's felt close all year. I know it did better early in the year versus later in the year. I think it has a lot of tools to be very relevant in the upcoming meta in SR2024. I think a lot of what it wants to do, SR2024 wants it to do. In terms of armies are going to be closer, you're not going to be able to hang back nearly as much. You're going to be able to put firepower into a compact space. You have relatively inexpensive infantry now with one of the changes that lets you spread out and be very wide, which is what a lot of these scenarios call for. You're able to project power pretty well, and the changes to Winterkorp are pretty interesting. So let's go through them real quick. So big one here, Puissance goes back to the way that it was originally intended, which was Puissance becomes target model unit. Before it was just single model, and it really should have always been model unit. Glad it's back to model unit. Having a strength buff or melee damage buff is huge for the faction, particularly on the unit side. Direwolf sees a couple of small tweaks. The evasive head goes down to cost 1, so that it becomes a choice between the evasive head and the shield guard head. The flame fist goes down a point from 5 to 4. With that, the flamethrower goes from range 8 to spray 6. Be interesting to see what these tweaks end up being on the battlefield. The flame fist is more attractive at 4. Again, it becomes a question of that or the shield for that same points cost. So it becomes a little interesting. I am higher on the heavy chain gun. Generally, if I'm running direwolves or the shield, those tend to be the two flavors of ice cream that I like best with it. So we'll see how it goes. Change to the spell Rock Wall. This affects all rock walls, but in Winterkorp it affects Valari. So the Rockwell template placed by the Rockwell spell is removed from the table if it is contacted by a model with an extra large or huge base. So you can't use the spell to block them out. Essentially now any of the wall templates are removed if they get hit by an extra large or huge based model. So good change, keeps the battlefield dynamic. Lets people that are bringing the big stompy stuff bring the big stompy stuff without it being trivially hindered by a spooky wall. Metavista gets a little bit of a wording tweak. It adds, even if it charged that activation, the last sentence of chain attack, grab and smash to correct an unintentional rules interaction. Mortar team goes up to Rat 6. I still don't think they get play. Again, 3 points for 1 POW 14 is not AoE. It's not the most thrilling thing in the world in Khador, but we'll see. Maybe it becomes a thing. The Stormtrooper Gunners get a huge change. This is my favorite change in the entirety of the faction, besides Puissance. They go from spray 10 to spray 8, but they increase their rate of fire from 1 to 2. They get the addition of both barrels, and for those that don't know, both barrels allows you to forfeit the 2 shots. Just get 1 shot, but get +4 to the damage of the weapon. And then they cut dual shot. These guys now have an ability with the both barrels to Again, under somebody like Volari, they can be pound 19. The 3 pound 19s into something is significant. It's a unit with reposition. It's a unit that is multi-wound. It is a unit that can be pretty mobile and fire. Also combined with the change that's coming up here, which is the Winterkorp infantry. They complement it pretty well. Winterkorp infantry now are always speed 6. Well, they increase their speed to speed 6. The encumbered rule is completely removed, and they go from points cost 7 to points cost 6. So this is a pretty significant change here. So now with a standard, they're going to cost 7, where before they cost 8. That means these guys are in the conversation to start bringing. I think with SR2024 being as wide as it is, this is definitely something that we need to be considering and thinking about from that perspective. And then we have our Winterkorp officer. He has a points cost reduction from 3 to 2. Winterkorp officer was one of the best models in the faction, and it just got cheaper. So yeah, I all on board with this change. So yeah, I think these are great changes for Winterkorp. Be interesting to see how it plays out. I think their cadre is going to really up their ability to play with the big boys. In many respects, the Puissance change is huge. Some of these changes, like the shock trooper gunners, I think you're going to see a bunch of them on the table once people catch on that this is pretty good value for 7 points. And I think you're going to see Winterkorp on the table. You may not see the banners with them. You may just want to keep them cheap, and take advantage of the additional volume fire guns, which is not a terrible route to go from a personal standpoint. I think that's something that can be done pretty well. And last thing I'll go over a little bit is the Dusk changes again, because I've talked so heavily about them. Dreadguard archers go to Rat 7. They increase their points cost from 8 to 9. May see an increase in boxes to 8. The Dreadguard Cav increase boxes to 8. Their cost goes up 2 to cost 12. They're a very strong unit. Going to 8 boxes with them is an incredibly strong change. And I think this does also open up additional list building, where it's not just automatically double cats, although I'm having a hard time not making a double cat list even at 24 points for that module. They're really darn good, especially at 8 boxes. The Dreadguard Slayers, they do not see a point increase. They stay at a sultry 7 and increase their damage boxes to 8. The Elodon goes to Mat 9. The gas gets a variety of changes. The biggest one for some people is they eliminated the power field head. That goes to cost 1 and becomes a reposition 2 head in terms of the ability. So power field is gone. The only model in the faction that has it is Izzy. So I'm a little bit sad about that. I was a late comer to power field ghasts, and they were annoying. But I will find something else to annoy people with in this faction. Aggressive has been added to the special rule to the fleet head. That's a pretty significant change, because that gives a free charge to the gas that are fleet. So these models that with the fleet head, with that type of build, you wanted to get them into the action anyway. So now to be able to do that for free, run a charge for free, pretty significant addition there. I like that change. Additionally, there was a change to the POW on the Blaster Fist weapon to 10, but its rate of fire was increased to 2. Previously, that was a hand cannon. It was POW 12. So now it goes down to 10, but we get an additional shot with it. Shadowbind was added to the Force Leash, and an increase on the POW's Spear Fist Rune Spear weapon to 11. So a bunch of changes on the gas. They're trying to make that a more attractive package. Uh, we'll see how it goes. I still think the best thing you can do with them is just run a cheap arc node for the one or two casters that really want one. Or if you've got some specific plays in mind to do so. Sarafel, the brand new caster, the Apotheosis caster, saw a slight tweak to her feat wording to try to make it a little more understandable. So enemy models that advance and their movement in or are placed in Scarfel's control range and are closer to her than they began suffer an unboostable POW 10 magic damage roll. Models that are damaged by the roll become knocked down. Models that are not damaged by the roll are pushed D3 away from Scarfel in the order you choose. So again, that is the order that Shrifeld chooses. And then Iron Storm lasts for 1 round. That was to alt to add clarity to your feat. 2 of the most underrated changes in the faction. The Secret Warden goes from Spell Ward to Sacred Ward, meaning they can now be affected by spells in faction, but it's not enemy spells. And then the Soulless Blade Masters, who were Spell Warded as well, also gain Sacred Ward. So now you can Bloodlust your Blade Masters, which is huge. You can Mirage them. You can do all the fun stuff with the Blade Masters now. So I think you're going to see Blade Masters see an uptick in play. I think you're going to see that anyway because of the ambush. But all these things mean Blade Masters are probably a great investment for you. Another really sneaky change here that I like is the Void Shaper went up to Rat 7. This gives you a slightly more reliable way to Shadowbind things because his gun is auto Shadowbind, provided that it hits. And being Rat 7 is pretty good. The difficulty is he does have ancillary attack for Jack on him, so it's always that choice that you're kind of making. But if you needed to increase your ability to hit, that is definitely a way you can do it. So things to consider and things to think about with the changes. So let's talk a bit about SR2024. A lot has been said around it. We have 6 new missions, 3 of which are essentially what was in the preview. There's not really any significant changes from how Recon was in the packet, how Battle Lines was in the packet, and how Wolves at Our Heels was in the preview packet. There are a few things to note on Wolves. I think Wolves is the one that is going to be the most hated because it is the most oddball stuff going on in terms of the collapsing kill box. The collapsing kill box is something that we haven't seen before. Most of the other things in this packet we have some type of corollary for generally. The collapsing kill box is something we haven't seen in Steamroller, frankly, ever. So it's something that people are going to miss. It's something that folks are going to have a hard time with. Additionally, this has a scoring bonus at the second player's 4th turn if the moving objective is closer to their opponent's board edge than their opponent's is from theirs. So if they're both equal distance, they both travel the same distance, then no points are scored. But if one is closer than the other, then points are scored. And it is you only ever score this once per game. So once you get it closer, you score it, and then you're not able to get another 3 from it. But it's a pretty significant ability within the confines of the rules here. But I think folks are going to be tripped up a bit on Wolves at their Hills. So we'll see how that one goes long term from a competitive standpoint. I'm not the hugest fan of everything it has going on in it. From the extracurricular part, from the the scenario element placement, that's cool. I'm pretty cool with the having the two, whichever one's further apart. Um, everyone's close to the opponent's edges gets a point or gets 3 points. I like that type of burst scoring um, at a dictated turn. It's just a little different, um, so it's something to keep in mind. Payload is a huge change in the game, and I like everything that's going on here. It introduces asymmetrical objectives. So the second player is going to have an objective on their side of the table that player one does not. Uh, Another big change, and this is across the entirety of the packet, is the deployment zones have changed. Player one has a 6-inch deployment zone now. Player two has an 11-inch deployment zone. So that is a significant change that I think aids second player advantage, being fairly significant. Additionally, the asymmetrical scoring elements are on player two sides only. So that is something that is also a significant potential scenario advantage. Uh, it's something to think about and consider as you're playing through the packet. Payload is super interesting because the 50 millimeters move. They move a little bit further if you're able to control a 40 or a 30. And when they get within 2 of your opponent's objective terrain piece, they blow it up, and then you score 5 points. Yeah, you score 5 points, which is a huge burst scoring in this game. Because you have to win by 3 on your opponent's turn. So going up by 5 in a turn for a singular action, while simultaneously removing one of their scoring elements, is a pretty significant swing in points for the turn. So that is something where opponent's going to have an ability to react to it, but it may be if they can't blow up yours that following turn, it's going to be very hard for them to get to keep that scoring within 3. So I like this one a lot. I think it really rewards going for it on scenario quite a bit, because you have a mechanism to kind of force a large differential beyond attrition. Two fronts may be my favorite item in the packet. It's super simple. Just across from each other on either side are 50 mils, 240 mils, and then the second player gets basically in the center of the table, or just behind the center of the table, a 30 millimeter objective. You get 1 point for controlling any of the objectives, but if you control 2 of any type, I'm sorry, 2 of the same type. So let's say you control both 50s or both 40s. In that instance, you would score 1 for each of the 50s, and then you'd score a bonus 2 points. So again, really rewards you for going all out on a player side, or going all out on an objective side to really gain a scenario advantage that can help overcome an attritional advantage that you would give up by going for the scenario. So I like this one quite a bit. These are the type of scenarios I'd love to see more of going forward as they continue to refine a design. Like Two Fronts is a great combination of, okay, I can play this a couple of different ways. If I go all out on scenario, I do create a mechanism where it's going to be very difficult for my opponent to come back over the top, but they have a chance to. So yeah, I like that a lot. Invasion is an interesting one, because Invasion, you have major swings of where the objective can be. The movement on the objective goes to 5, which is pretty significant. And it's multiple objectives. Provided you've secured them, you get to move them 5 inches, which is pretty good advantage. Anything that you did not secure, you're going to move 3. So you really have a moving battlefield in this, which is very interesting. Additionally, if you're able to get one of your opponent's objectives within their own deployment zone, or within your own deployment zone, you score 5 points. That's a one-time thing. So again, I'm a big fan of burst objectives, which is definitely what this is. That just makes the game more interesting. It lets it not be a pure attrition fest. Big fan of this. But I definitely think you want to go second in this packet. I think that's what you're aiming to do. I think you want to build your list now in a way that is flexible. I think flexibility is going to be huge in this particular packet. I think assassination is very huge in this packet for a variety of reasons, not just on wolves, but also on wolves. You need to build with that in mind, at least in your pairing. So you gotta take that into account. Really a fan of SR2024. I think it's trying a lot of interesting things. I think there's some things that miss the mark on, but they're in something that's this much of a radical departure from what we're used to. I'm happy with it. I think there's going to be tweaks. There's always tweaks. I've never been fully in love with a Steamroller packet. They all have their quirks and their bits, and it's onesie twosie things on specific missions. It's the same thing here. But I'm excited to get playing with this more. Get some reports up on the channel. Those will be coming shortly. So more content coming in the new year, but looking forward to it. So have a great one, and remember, remember, there should always be tyrants on the field.